Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I love the energy. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. Welcome to today's exciting and fun meeting. It's a big birthday year for the DEC, 90 years of incredible speakers and networking. And that tradition continues today. It's a tradition unlike any other. Thanks, Jim Nantz, and all of you Masters fans out there today. I especially want to welcome our DEC members. If you're not a DEC member yet, just give me 10 seconds to convince you. Your next prospect, client, job, maybe even best friend is right in this room. If you want to build your network and learn from thought leaders on our stage, invest in you and join today. You can sign up at econclub.org. And if you're not a member and you want to sign up today, we'll give you a free event ticket to anything we've got coming up through the month of June. You can stop at our registration table on your way out to lunch. As we get started, I would just ask you to please take a moment to silence your cell phone so we don't disturb the program. And of course, many of you have been with us before, and you know that we always begin with a pledge and a prayer. So please stand and join me as we honor our country with the Pledge of Allegiance, and the flag is to your left. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Chris Zarbaugh, and Chris is from Heritage Church. Pastor?
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray in agreement, asking for your blessings and favor. For everyone in the Lions organization, for those who sit up high to those on the field. We ask for your favor, both professionally and personally. First, Lord, we pray for the mental health and well-being of our people, for this upcoming season to be filled with good relationships in our homes, and from that overflow, for this organization to be as healthy as it can be, to be filled with purpose, drive, grit, and fun. Lord, give us wisdom to make the right choices, both strategically behind the scenes as well as in the public eye. Lord, we pray for protection. Protect our players from serious injury, but even more, Lord, protect our culture, our momentum, and our ability to be a team. Lord, also, we thank you in advance for the great things we know are coming. We thank you for our victories being in the majority, for the momentum of this entire city being filled with excitement. And please, Lord, help the referees to be fair and educated. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Yes. We love it. Thank you, Pastor. You may all please be seated. A couple of quick thank yous. I want to thank you to WJR, who's doing their focus show live from the lunch ballroom we're going to be in, and you'll see them while you're enjoying lunch. I want to also say thank you to WXYZ TV Channel 7 General Manager Mike Murray and our good friends at the Detroit Sports Commission for their assistance with today's meeting. And two people I'm going to call out from my DEC team whose handiwork you're going to see on screen today, and that's Amy and Matt. Thank you to all of you guys. So students are here today and always, courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors, and the students' mornings already began with a private Q&A session with our guest speakers today. I want to tell you who is in the room with us today. We've got students from Schoolcraft College, compliments of General Motors, the U of D Jesuit Cubs, thanks to Visit Detroit and the Detroit Sports Commission. I've got a group of students from Northville High School. It's the part of their football team, thanks to Stephanie and Ford Motor Company. And then two groups of amazing and talented students from the Manoogian School in Southfield. One of those groups is brought to you by Local IQ, and the other is brought here by Josh and the good people at Citizens Bank. So please join me in a round of applause to welcome the students and thank those sponsors. Really quick, upcoming programs. We've loaded up our seasonal lineup. We've got something for everybody. Next week, right here at the Motor City, we will host Dow CEO Jim Fitterling. On April 23rd, Barbara McQuaid has a new book out called Attack from Within, focusing on disinformation. She'll be on our stage with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. The kind of hot, kind of not so hot, but we still love them, Detroit Tigers are here on April the 30th. That's always a fun one. May 2nd, CNN CEO of the Year, Mike Sievert from T-Mobile, will travel from Seattle to be here at the DEC. Tons more on the website, tons more to come. Get your tickets before they sell out. And I also want to shout out while I'm here, our sponsors and partners. Make no mistake, we would not be here today delivering programs like you're going to see without the generosity of those people. So thank you. If you're part of that sponsorship group, we've got over 100. We'd love to add you and your company as a corporate sponsor as well. The Free Press recently published the epic story of the Detroit Lions 2023 Renaissance called From Grit to Glory. And you see that on your screen. I've got a copy here. We're going to give away 3 books at the end of the program, and if you're not one of the winners, the books will be available for purchase in the hallway on your way to lunch, so thank you to the Free Press. Finally, use your smartphone and you can be involved in today's program. We want you to take lots of pictures, share with your social media network using #EconClub. And Terry Radigan, who you'll see in a moment, will prompt you to scan the QR code that you'll see on the screen for some audience participation fun. So let's put Terry to work. He is the chair of the Detroit Sports Organizing Corp. They're the group that brings major sports events to Detroit, like the recent NCAA basketball regionals, and of course the reason we're here today, the NFL draft coming to Detroit April 25th through 27th, just 2 weeks away. We are so excited about that. Terry's a DEC board member, an amazing supporter of the organization, and me personally, a great friend to all and to me as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I turn it over to Terry Radigan. Please welcome Terry. Thank you, my friend.
Well, thank you, Steve. That kind introduction. I share your excitement about the draft 2 weeks away. I also share your excitement about our Detroit Lions. So not only will we hear from 2 panels today, but as Steve mentioned, we're also going to hear from you in the audience. We have 3 interactive polls that we'll be conducting throughout the program. So let's get started with our first panel. Rod Wood is the president and CEO of the Detroit Lions. It's a position he has held since 2015. Rod, along with Lions owner Sheila Hamp, has established a new leadership vision for the Lions, and boy, are we seeing the results of that. The 2023 team enthralled Lions fans across the globe, and it's been a long time since our city has been ignited by a team like they did. Brad Galley is our moderator today, and he's the sports director of WXYZ Channel 7 in Detroit. Brad has won multiple awards, including Emmys, and does an amazing job covering every aspect of sports in our town. You can watch him anchor sports on Channel 7 Action News at 5, 6, and 11, and also on TV 20 at 10 p.m. So please give a warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Rod Wood and Brad Galley.
That's got me fired up. My goodness. Welcome, everybody, again. My name is Brad Galley with Rod Wood. I'd like to thank Steve Gregorian and the Detroit Economic Club for having us today. My boss is Mike Murray, our general manager at Channel 7, for being here today to support the cause. But all of you, thank you for being here. Raise your hand if you're one of the students in the crowd today. Where are all the students? Thanks for being here. It's awesome. Hopefully you learn something, make a connection, and can help the next generation when you're up here someday. I used to come to these luncheons, so happy to be here with you. Rod, the first question after watching that video, is Detroit ready? We're 2 weeks away. Is Detroit ready for this draft?
I think 100%. Both the city to host it and the Lions to draft the next round of superstars. And obviously we didn't know when we bid on the draft that we'd be winning it in a year that the team was so much on the map, but it makes it all that much more special. And drafting late, we should keep the crowd there until about midnight, waiting for the 29th pick. My only disappointment is we're not picking 32nd.
That's true. That's for next year, right? That is the funny thing. We used to look at the draft and go, okay, so what are they going to do third, first, or in the first 10 picks? And now you can kind of wait, kick back, and just see the city shining. And there's been so much talk about how the city is going to host this, and we're all so excited about it. But you in your role, we're here to talk about the Lions. what's next for this team, the organization, catching the wind of going to the NFC Championship, winning the NFC North. What was that ride like from your seat, so close to the action, inside the action last season, Rod?
You know, it was incredible. You don't really reflect on it until after the season's over because, you know, especially not experiencing the playoffs in a long time, you kind of have gotten used to, we know when the season's going to end, you know, the last regular season game. This year we had no idea when the season was going to end. And, you know, getting in the rhythm of getting ready to play a team that you weren't sure who the opponent was going to be the first week, it turned out couldn't be any better than Stafford coming back to Detroit. And hopefully putting all that talk behind us. And then, you know, the next week with the Cowboys losing, getting to host the second game against Tampa, and then getting ready to go to San Francisco. And in between the Tampa and the San Francisco game, we had to be fully prepared to go to the Super Bowl. So we had to, you know, plan how we were going to transport everybody there, hotel rooms, tickets, et cetera. And at halftime of that game, I thought all that planning was going to be worth it. Unfortunately, the second half didn't go our way. But I will tell you now, having gone through that, it makes the offseason that much shorter. You know, we were ready to, you know, jump into the draft in prior years as soon as the season ended. But obviously this shortened it, but I like the shorter offseason and the longer playoff run. So it was great. I think, you know, the highlight film that you just saw, it was a magical season. Hopefully we've whetted everybody's appetite for even better things to come.
One of the first orders of business for you, the front office, for ownership, was to extend the contracts of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Can you take us behind the scenes and tell us when that process started and the conversations began and what it was like putting those contracts in front of those two men?
We really didn't start serious conversations till the season was over. I didn't want to get anybody distracted from anything, but it was certainly on my mind knowing where the season was headed. When we hired both of them, Dan initially got a 6-year contract, Brad got a 5-year contract, so one of my objectives was to get them aligned with the same end date. So we extended Brad by 2 years, Dan by 1, so they're both with us for the next 4 years at least, and hopefully much longer. And then it was a question of, you know, working with their representatives to change the contract, extend it, and be fair to them given the performance they've put on the field and what they've meant to the city and to the team. And I can't say enough good things about both of them. Yeah. And it was very easy. Both their representatives I know well, and we've done other deals together. So it was a win-win. It really took basically a week from start to finish to get it done.
Hiring them took a little bit longer, and the process that the organization used with Sheila, with yourself, so involved in trying to say we're going to take a step but do it differently. Can you take us back to that time and look and see what really stood out about Brad and Dan and the vision you guys had and what was going to be next for the Lions organization?
Sure. You know, in hindsight, looking back, you know, a lot of people criticized our process, but now people are trying to replicate it. So it's kind of an interesting results proof out the point. I would say the most important thing is we spent a good part of the remaining part of that season after we made the decision to move on from the prior regime, really asking ourselves, what are we looking for? What do we want for the Detroit Lions? Not who's the hot name, not what team might have produced a winning team that therefore you want to, you know, pluck away one of their representatives. And we really spent a lot of time focusing on culture and who was going to be the right leader and leaders for the culture that we wanted. And so we put together a series of criteria against which we were going to measure everybody that we interviewed. We interviewed 12 candidates for the GM position, 8 candidates for the head coaching position simultaneously. So 20 Zoom interviews that each average probably 2 to 4 hours. So a big commitment of time. At the end of each interview, we would independently grade our view of the candidate that we interviewed, and it was me, Sheila, Chris Spielman, and Mike Disner, our chief operating officer. We then compare notes and decide, are we going to keep this person in the mix or are we going to move on? And I will tell you, I've said this before publicly, especially with Brad, I'm a very big first impression person. And I usually write a note in the margin of the documents I'm writing my notes on. And about 2 minutes into the interview with Brad, I just wrote, "This is the guy." Wow. Because if you can come through with, you know, personality and intellect and leadership on a Zoom call versus in person, it was just dynamic.
We've been on a lot of Zoom calls, all of us, over the last few years, so yeah, that says a lot.
And with Dan, you can kind of imagine, we actually interviewed him the morning after. He was with the Saints at the time. They had won a playoff game the night before. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning the next morning. I'm not sure he had slept. And now that you all know Dan, you can imagine this. He's drinking a double coffee like this and leans right up to the screen and goes, "I want this job." And he didn't want a job. He wanted our job. He wanted the Detroit Lions job. He'd played here. He knew the city. He knew the culture. He knew what it would mean to bring a winner to this town. And thankfully, they both delivered on it.
You've got a big party 2 weeks from now. You'll be in the war room, though, I assume, looking at the draft a week before, so the week in between next Thursday, a week from now, you're going to reveal new jerseys. I think we have the slide. You're going to reveal them here first?
I don't think we brought that with us.
No. Sorry. That would have been great. It would have been really great. Can you just tell us what that process was like, and maybe just a tease for the crowd that came to hear you speak today?
Sure. So the interesting thing with uniforms is you're only allowed to change your uniforms once every 5 years with the league. And so the current uniforms that we have, we're in, I think, year 7 or 8. And we had decided a few years ago to consider kind of a updating of the jerseys. And so we worked on this for 2 years with the league office, with Nike, who designs the jerseys, led by Brian Ficini, who's here, our Chief Communication Officer, and Mike Disner, and members of their team. And I think our goal was to honor the past, and we have great colors, we have great history, but also put a modern twist on it. And so I think when you see them, you'll see both of those things, and you'll see, hopefully, uniforms that propel us, at least for the next 5 years, to be, I think, one of the great uniforms in the NFL. And we're never going to change them dramatically, but there's always an opportunity to modernize them, and I think people will see that.
From my uncle, who's over here, a season ticket holder, are the 6s going to be easier to read and to differentiate between the 8s?
I feel like that's a question that would disclose some information. I would say having all the numbers easier to read, while not an objective, was an outcome.
Okay, nice. That's good. I know so many people are interested in that. So many people are interested in what's to come for this team. I saw Penei Sewell at the home opener for the Tigers throw the first pitch, and I said, "What do you think of Brad's offseason?" Because everyone expects him to do what he's doing, put great people around us. We just expect that at this point. To know how much momentum you just built up in this past season, what can fans expect going into this next 2024 campaign?
I feel like we've just got it started, actually. And I think one of the things that was great with the free agency acquisitions, and I think Brad touched on this at the league meetings, you know, when you go into free agency, it's not like the draft. You get to select a player. Free agency, you have to convince people to join you. You have to outbid perhaps other teams that might be bidding on those players. And so you go into with a series of plans. And we had plan A, plan B, plan C, and usually end up with a little bit of each. And we got our entire plan A. Everything that we sought out to bring to the team, we got.
Yeah, that's worth applause.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the culture. People want to play for a winner. They want to play for a coach they respect and like. The whole league knows each other, and players talk. And when you start having our players, like Penei or others, talk to their peers on other teams and say, "You want to come play here," it makes it a lot easier to bring the guys here. So I think with what we did in free agency, we addressed a lot of the needs on defense in particular. We were able to sign Kevin Zeitler to replace Jonah, who we unfortunately lost. Gives us an opportunity to go in the draft, and we can just kind of go wherever the board takes us and get the best player available.
Players talk, different people in the front office talk. That caffeine habit that Dan has he gotten you hooked? Is it like you have your 2 cups of coffee and he has his next, and that's how you start the morning?
I'm a big coffee drinker, but I'm not in his league. I will tell you that. You know, we do usually see each other at the coffee. And I said, "How many cups is that?" And he goes, "It was only 2." I said, "Well, your cups are like 4, though, because they're like double shots of, espresso, and then on top of venti, and then the next one comes." So his caffeine intake is probably multiples of mine, even though I drink the same number of cups. So.
Thanks for building what you have. I know you said you're just getting started. We are all looking forward to seeing what's next. Rod Wood, everybody, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Rod.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Rod, and all the best in the draft. We're all right behind you. Our next panel will focus on the Lions draft, and for that we tap some of the best sports journalists who cover the Lions, and we'll start with Dave Burkett from the Detroit Free Press. He's the beat writer for the Lions. He's covered them since 2010, and his articles and insights are must-read for any Lions fan. Nick Baumgardner is the senior writer and NFL draft analyst for The Athletic. If you are a Lions fan or an NFL fan, following Nick is a must. And Will Birchfield is a sports writer for 97.1 The Ticket, and we enjoy watching him on Fox 2 Lions pregame and also on Sportsworks on Sunday nights. So we're going to start with our audience poll. Use your phone, please, to scan the QR code on the screen and answer the question. The question is, what are the Lions' draft needs? And for this one, you can answer as many times as you would like. So, Brad, maybe we'll find out what these guys think.
It was pretty immediate here. We're getting instant feedback.
Early results, cornerback.
That was fast.
Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today, guys. Dave just pointed out that we all have bees in our name, which is something.
Wow, how about that? The bee crew.
Killer bees. Swarm.
Steve made that a specification for today. We are also excited about the draft. And like I said, it used to be easier for us to project and put the mock drafts together, and there would be 3 or 4 names where we'd go, okay, it's going to be one of those guys. It's wide open right now. We're going to get into some specifics. We have some video to show you and get you familiar with some of the guys that these guys project the Lions might go get. But just overall, you see what the people are saying. What do you guys feel? Dave, we'll start with you. That is this team's biggest need now after the first few weeks of free agency.
Well, I just want to point out, quarterback has 3%. So if Jared Goff is listening, that's not.
He's going to find you, people who voted that.
4%.
Jared's going to find him.
No, you're right. I mean, I think the Lions have one of the most complete rosters in the NFL. Really, every position they have capable starters, guys who would start for other NFL teams. And as Rod said, that gives them a lot of options in the draft. I mean, Brad Holmes has always been one that has gone best player available on his board. That certainly will be the case this year. I think cornerback is still a big need. I think I would agree with most of the people out here. I wrote a story today. They've had 8 cornerbacks, at least 8 of the top cornerbacks in for visits. It tells you how much they're looking at that position. Offensive line, that'd be a sneaky one too, though, just based on some future needs that they have.
That's where I would go. Offensive line is the sneaky one to me, right? Because corner and defensive end are pretty obvious. I think we would all agree. The classes of corner and defensive end, the prospects this year, maybe especially the edge guys, are not maybe as good as we've seen in years past. So I do think, like Dave brought up, they're at the end of the first round. If an offensive lineman, let's say a center who can also play guard, is available at the end of the first round, I think that's certainly a possibility. We talk about Frank is about to be 28 right now. He's been hurt. He's been banged up. I think he wants to keep going, but that's something that down the road you don't want to be caught flat-footed with. So I think offensive line could be sneaky a little bit maybe.
Will, everyone's screaming, Aiden on one side, we need more pass rush.
Well, first of all, Dave has been covering the Lions for so long that I was in high school his first year covering the Lions. So for the high schoolers in here, maybe you and I will be sitting up here one day on this stage. I think wide receiver.
You aging me, Will. Thank you.
I think wide receiver is another sneaky need for this team, especially with Josh Reynolds going off to the Broncos. You could argue that they only have one proven NFL receiver on this roster right now, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams, as talented as he is, probably is more promise than proof at this point. And beyond that, there is a need in that room. Now you've got great pass catchers and Sam Laporta, even Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. But I think if a player like maybe a Adonai Mitchell is there at 29, that's someone they look long and hard at. They could use another big-bodied red zone target receiver who can win balls in the air. So looks like that's number 3 on the list here. Wouldn't be surprised to see Holmes, maybe not in the first round, but the first 2 rounds, strike at receiver.
Our goal today, at least one of them, is to make you leave here and say, at my draft party, at Campus Martius, wherever you're going to be, I am the most informed person within my group because of the bees, because of all of these guys that you read, that you see all the time, that you watch on TV, and then that goofy guy that was kind of moderating the whole time as well. We're thrilled to bring you as close as we can to the coverage. Will, let's kick it back to you here and maybe just go right to that first round, 29th pick. Say Holmes stays there, doesn't make a trade. What guy do you imagine could be called with that 29th overall pick in the Detroit Lions?
So first of all, and this would be a great story, it's a local kid out of Canton High who really didn't even play football all that seriously until his junior, maybe even senior year, Darius Robinson, who used to collect autographs at Lions training camp as a youngster. In fact, his mom shared a photo just a few months ago of Darius Robinson, maybe age 12, getting Nick Fairley's autograph at training camp as a youngster, and now he looks like a late first-round pick, right in that number 29, 30 range. And he's a long, physical defensive end. He can play some on the inside. As he's played more and more football, he just keeps on getting better and better. And scouts talk about him as just a relentless player, a guy who you see in the weight room constantly, kind of fits that Detroit Lions mold under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. And he would be a great complement. They need someone opposite Hutchinson, because as good as Hutchinson has been now for 2 years, there has been a lull across from him on the defensive line. So if they could add someone like Robinson to the picture, and imagine that, 2 Metro Detroiters wreaking havoc up front for the hometown team. To me, Robinson makes sense from a positional need, but also a culture fit here in Detroit.
If Dave's on his phone, just be careful that there might be news breaking. So maybe the Amon-Ra St. Brown extension is filed. Jared Goff, just let us know first, Dave. Or maybe go to your editor and then let us know.
My editor's out there, but Brad scared me. You scared me because you said Amon-Ra is going to happen when we're up here, right?
It will.
What
It
I
always
do.
will, inevitably. Nick, I'll kick it to you now. First round, 29th overall. Everybody out here wants to feel smart. Who do the Lions take?
So again, I'm gonna go back to the offensive line a little bit, because I think that should be considered, given the fact that the cornerback class I don't think is super deep. I don't think the defensive end class is super deep. You love the receiver class, and you're going to have chances to get at that in day 2 and probably even day 3. They have an opportunity this year, I really feel like. There's Chop Robinson coming off the edge, to really fortify the future of what they are, which is they run the football, they ground and pound. They just, didn't pay Jonah Jackson, obviously, as we saw, which I thought was a smart decision. You bring Zeitler in, but if you can bring in a young guy who can be the future, first-round talent, I think that just fits with their identity. It doubles down on what you're already good at, and it forces teams to continue to have to deal with the fact that you have 3 or 4 all the time top-level offensive linemen. So Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon is one that I've looked at a lot. Graham Barton from Duke is another one that I've looked at. Even the Zach Frazier from West Virginia, that might be a little bit high for him, but there's a bunch of guys there that could slip up.
Some of the defensive backs we're seeing here, Cooper DeJean here from Iowa, one of the few guys that actually played well against Marvin Harrison Jr., at least kept him in check a little bit, Dave.
Yeah, I'll talk about those in one sec. I just wanted to echo what Nick said, because those 2 linemen, Jackson Powers Johnson and Barton, were the last 2 linemen or players I gave the Lions in my mock drafts. So I'm in lockstep with you there. I think the Lions' needs at that position, given the age that they have at guards, you mentioned Frank Ragnow, his health, even Taylor Decker, he's coming up on the last year of his contract. I think they have a lot of options there. It could be a tackle, right? Maybe you draft a tackle because you like a tackle that much, and you decide to move on from Decker eventually, move Sewell to the left side. Maybe it's an interior lineman. I think Rakestraw, who you're seeing right here, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. from Missouri.
Big Rakestraw guy, like
he's good.
Ennis. Dave, now you're not sold?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the mock drafts, like maybe he's not going in the first round or as
Right.
high as he was early on, but he is a Lions type of player.
Yeah.
I mean, the physicality that he plays with, some of the things that he can do. I mentioned all these guys. Rakestraw was one of them that came in for a visit. I do think he's the type of player that would fit the Lions at 29. The one thing I would say to that is Brad Holmes has drafted 4 defensive backs in his 3 drafts. 3 of those guys have come on day 2. The other was
Right.
the 7th-round pick. So as much as I think that's a need, we all think that's a need, history tells us that maybe the way Brad values that is as a day 2 pick.
And can I jump in there? I think if Brad Holmes does take a cornerback, it means that he sees a legitimate franchise cornerback, because he has said, look,
That's true.
I don't want to call myself a, quote, snob, but he does hold cornerbacks to a very high standard, in large part because he was a defensive back cross-checker during his days as a scout with the Rams way back when. So he's obsessed with cornerback and defensive back play. And to me, if he takes one on the first day or even the second day, it means he sees a potential star. And I think Rakestraw is a guy who fits that bill. In fact, he's drawn comparisons to Darius Slay. And the last time the Lions had a legitimate number 1 corner, I guess pre-Carlton Davis trade, was Darius Slay. And I think it would be easier for a cornerback now, drafted higher, to come in because he won't be asked to be a number 1 shutdown guy off the jump. Whereas when they drafted Okudah, 3rd overall in 2020, they asked him to be the guy right away, and he never was able to do that. This player could come in and play under Carlton Davis's wing for at least a season, and then in theory take over the number 1 job in 2025. So I think it makes sense if he sees a guy for them to strike, and if he does, it means he sees a legitimate superstar in my mind at cornerback.
Nick, you used the term a Brad Holmes guy, a Lions guy, a fit. It hasn't taken long. You study these guys year-round, these draft prospects. It's not taken long for people to look and identify college players and say, oh, they'd fit the Lions.
Yeah.
We never used to say that,
Right.
ever.
No.
And you notice it year-round and kind of point and pinpoint and handpick guys that could work here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Holmes and Campbell, but mainly Holmes. I think you can go back to the Rams days when he was with the Rams. It's always versatility and traits. Can you do multiple things, and do you have long arms when you need to have long arms? Are they longer than average? Are they way longer than average, right? How's the vertical? He looks at everything, I think, that goes into it, and then is just trying to find the most complete, sort of athlete that can make an impact, and then you find out what you have. Ife Melifonwu is one of my favorite picks that they've had, and it was at the time. I remember when they took him, he was a cover 3 corner who didn't do anything but just sit in cover 3 and go back and that side shuffle that you all see. Didn't really do much in man, didn't do much in anything else, but he's got all that length that we've seen, had really never played safety, and they took their time with him, right, and they figured it out, and now, he looks like a guy that could be a Pro Bowler in time, right? So, I mean, they do a really good job of finding guys that just have stuff that you can't coach, and I think that's the main sticker.
Terry, I believe you're joining us again now. You've heard from these guys some of the first-round names that they've looked at, pinpointed. Time for the audience to weigh in?
Absolutely. You've heard from the experts. You've seen the videos. Now you get to be Lions general manager. And you'll scan the QR code again, please. And you're going to pick the Lions' first pick. You can only pick one this time. So let's see how that goes. And I'll turn it back over to you, Brett.
Yeah, it's Iowa defensive back Cooper DeJean, Oregon center Jackson Powers Johnson, Bama's defensive back Kool-Aid McKinstry, Missouri edge Darius Robinson, Duke O-lineman Graham Barton, Missouri's defensive back Ennis Rakestraw, and Penn State defensive end Chop Robinson. They're feeling the
Chop
Kool-Aid
fans
and a
here.
little bit of Chop love.
It's the 3 people that I've given the Lions in my mock draft are the 3 at the bottom of
So-
this right now.
Well, Chop is an interesting one, though, right? Because he is exactly what we just talked about. He is a low production player who hasn't really done a lot in his 3 years there, but he's got all of the traits. He's freaky athletic. He runs like a safety, for crying out loud, as a guy up there. So, I mean, I've thought about maybe if Chop falls, if the Lions even consider moving off that pick, maybe he would be there, or even if they take a chance at him there, he could be a candidate for sure.
I'll say something real quick about Cooper DeJean, too, since none of us talked about him up here. We talk about he does have a lot of the athletic traits I think that they like. Also the ball skills.
Oh, yeah,
There's 2
the
things that
best.
he can do is he was very productive at Iowa. I think a lot of people probably know the name from watching Big Ten football in here. Very productive and also an excellent punt returner. And I wonder now with the new kickoff rules how that might impact a guy's status, just to be an extra little something in the guys making the picks in their head that could be a separating factor. So I don't know. Well, someone had told me that they think maybe running backs will be more valuable in that because it's sort of a one-cut, function, I guess, when you're returning kicks. But Cooper DeJean is an excellent return man, so that'd be a little something extra about him too.
Will?
Yeah, and we haven't talked much about Graham Barton either, who looks like one of probably the safer interior offensive linemen in this draft. He actually played mostly right tackle at Duke, only allowed, I think, 3 sacks in his final 2 seasons, but he looks like more like an NFL center, an NFL guard. I go back to the first 2 major moves that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell made here, aside from the Stafford Goff trade. It was to draft Penei Sewell in the first round, 6th overall, and then to extend Frank Ragnow. They know their identity is inextricably tied to the offensive line, and they are going to continue to fortify it. I remember when they drafted Sewell, Holmes called it feeding the beast. I would not be surprised to see them add more fuel to that fire in this draft. And Graham Barton is a mean run blocker. He's a really clean pass blocker. He finishes every block. And you hear the Lions talk about that a lot, from a coaching staff to the front office. They want guys who finish their plays. And Graham Barton he'll block you like Michael Orr does in the movie Blind Side over the fence into the parking lot. He'll finish blocks, and I think he's a guy who could interest them at 29 or in the 2nd round.
So he's the guy that if they draft him, like a few of these guys, that Dan Campbell gets elbowed again.
Yeah,
has
in the
to go to
ribs.
the back of the room. Yeah.
I would also say on Kool-Aid, we were just talking about fits, other than the awesome name that he has there, which would be great for everyone, right? Like Kool-Aid jersey or something. But I don't know. I think Rakestraw would actually be a better fit for them in terms of who they are, what they're about, because of his physicality, because of his willingness to help against the run. Rakestraw is actually not the fastest corner in this draft, which has given me a little bit of pause there, and Glenn doesn't like, guys that aren't super fast. But he plays a physical brand of football that I think Kool-Aid kind of doesn't. He's more of a patient corner who sort of lets things come to him. He's very long. And I don't know if Aaron Glenn likes timid corners. And I don't know if it's fair to call Kool-Aid timid, but that's something to think about, just the style of how they play.
The one other knock I've heard on Rakestraw, the injuries, I think,
Yeah, he had
Yeah.
That's one reason why I think, you don't see his name in the first round of some of these mock drafts, that he may be available in day 2. And you look again
yeah.
at a lot of the cornerbacks that the Lions have brought in, their day 2 types, including Kool-Aid McKinstry. So, as much as, again, I think they need a cornerback, and that's definitely an area that I wouldn't rule out at 29. My intuition here just sort of tells me that maybe that's something that they take in the second round.
Yeah.
This first round may be one of the most thrilling in the history of NFL drafts, and we get to watch it unfold right in our city. There are a lot of quarterbacks that could go in those first 5 to 10 picks.
Yeah.
So we are going to dive into that. These are some of the household names, the names the names that everybody's throwing around. And we'll start with Caleb Williams at the top, guys. Will, I'll kick it all the way back over to you. We all assume, we all know, we all read, we all hear. We read, he's going number 1 overall. Is there anything to refute that in your mind?
Not in my mind, and I would take him if I were the Bears. He looks like a potential superstar in the NFL, and obviously they think the same way because they traded Justin Fields to open the door for their next quarterback. And what a great situation he might be walking into in Chicago. I mean, they have a cast of weapons now on that offense. DJ Moore had a great season last year. They add Keenan Allen. DeAndre Swift is now over there. Khalil Montgomery. They've got a lot of pieces to accentuate all the things that Caleb Williams does so well. And all of a sudden, the NFC North looks like a bit of a beast of a division. I mean, last year it was probably the weakest, but aside from the Vikings next year, this might be one of the strongest divisions in football. And the addition of a player like Caleb Williams is only going to make the Bears more dangerous. They were already a threat in the second half of last season. Adding him to that offense, I think, elevates them further.
Listen, the Lions weren't very good for a long stretch of time, right? I mean, 30 years.
30 decades, man.
30 decades.
Now you're making us all feel old.
That too.
Those 30 years, Green Bay had a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback,
Yeah.
Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, right, from one to the other without missing a beat. And I think the Lions are a really, really good team. They've got a really, really good roster. But, if Caleb Williams is that, if J.J. McCarthy is that, and maybe the Vikings trade up to get him, that's just the one thing that would give me a little bit of pause about the Lions long-term here. And I think they're going to be really good. They got a really good roster, but just something to keep an eye on within the division, to your point.
Yeah.
Nick, do you want to jump in on JJ? Because one of my favorite things about this past football season, when JJ goes early in this draft, Nick and I aren't going to gloat, but we called it about 1.5 years, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He is really talented. The numbers weren't there. The winning was, and I think everyone's seeing now on
Right.
tape the intangibles.
Yeah, I mean, he's a terrific athlete, right? I think that if you've seen, there's probably Michigan fans in here, the first game he ever played in the stadium, the first one that he ever did anything, he does a thing where he doesn't know what he's doing, right? At the time, he's not reading well, but he reverses his field, crosses across his body, and then does one of these deals where he throws all the way across his body, 50 yards in the air, right into a bucket to a guy that runs in and scores a touchdown. And it's like, okay, everyone in the press box that day was like, well, this is different. He can do things that we haven't seen before. So athletically, with the arm talent and everything else, there's a rawness to him, obviously, but I think teams really, really like his aggressiveness. He doesn't, as you know, if you've watched Michigan, he doesn't settle for very much, and he's very knowledgeable with the run game and everything else. So I think you're going to need to give him a minute. But I do think that, we just talked about the Vikings. They did not make moves to not make another trade to go up and get a quarterback. So I think J.J. McCarthy could be certainly a top 10 pick. I think he could be a top 5 pick. It wouldn't shock me at all.
One other thing I know scouts like about him, coaches like about him, is he wins, and
Yeah, I think he's got one loss his whole life.
for everyone who says a quarterback wins are not a stat, maybe they're not, but I can tell you that decision makers like that about J.J. McCarthy. They like that about their quarterbacks in particular. The success he's had at Michigan, teams love that, and he will be a top 5 pick,
Actually,
maybe top 4.
I don't think he's ever lost a start. Matter of fact, I think the only loss he had was as a backup because I think he was undefeated in high school and then.
The TCU.
Well, I guess that's true. The playoff
the
game.
one.
Yeah, the one.
Harbaugh might just trade Herbert to bring in J.J. McCarthy. I wouldn't totally shock me.
Wondered
I
it.
think Michael Penix is one of the most fascinating quarterbacks in this draft. And I know he's probably not a first-round pick, but the arm talent is undeniable for Penix. And he's kind of like that flick of the wrist quarterback. He doesn't even need to try, and he can throw the ball 60 yards down the field. And he might be a second-round guy, but another guy who has a record of winning at Washington. And I know there are concerns about his age and his injury history and maybe some wonky mechanics that lead to a low release point. But I watch him play and throw, and I see a guy that could pick apart NFL secondaries. Now, he might not be mobile as someone like JJ or Jaden Daniels, but I do think that in the right system, Michael Penix can thrive in the NFL, because what he can do that I'm not sure JJ can do or has proven to be able to do is sit in the pocket, diagnose a defense, and surgically pick it apart. And I think with receivers and an offensive line, Penix could be a really value pick in the second round.
Caleb goes 1. Nick, who goes 2?
Drake May, then
Drake
Jaden, then Daniels, then McCarthy, then Nix, then Penix would be how I would do it.
Drake May goes 2. All the talk of Jaden Daniels, the Heisman.
I
Those three.
think Jaden Daniels I like Jaden Daniels. I like a lot about him, but you remember when Justin Fields came out?
Yeah.
There were issues about keeping his eyes up in the pocket when there's pressure and not dropping him and running. Daniels does the exact same thing, and there were also issues at that time of Justin didn't like to attack the middle of the field. Jaden really doesn't either. I like Drake May better than Jaden.
Might take Jaden Daniels 2 and Drake May 3, but I think you're right on that order for the most part. And those top guys are going top 4, 5
Yes,
picks.
I think those top 4 will be
Vikings are
going.
trading up without a doubt.
Will, we're talking 5 years from now. Pro Bowl selections are out. At that point, they're just doing video games. It's just a Madden Pro Bowl. The flag football has been thrown out. But at that point, who has earned their spot from this draft class as maybe, let's give 2 guys. Who are the top 2 guys? We all project that Caleb can be that guy. Who's there standing with him 5 years from
Just among quarterbacks?
now? Just among quarterbacks in this class.
I'll go out on a limb, and I don't even really love this pick, but I think Drake May has Justin Herbert-like ability. I know there's a lot of bust ability in Drake May, given his predilection for turnovers and some questionable decision-making, but he has an NFL Justin Herbert-like arm, and I feel like he might end up in New England, which probably isn't the best spot for a rookie quarterback right now, but I do like the makeup. I love the build. I love the strength and durability, and if he can clean up some of that decision-making, I think he has a chance to be a boom much more than a bust in the NFL.
Is there any chance the Lions make any sort of move in the first round? The Goff extension isn't done yet. Is there any flirtation with saying, wow, I can't believe this guy's dropped? Is Holmes fallen in love with anybody, Dave?
You had the opportunity to ask Rod about that golf
You
experience.
It was
just
on
let
a
him go.
do not ask list.
Okay.
He
that
will
get
walk
done.
out.
And Rod will get done. They'll both get done, this summer at the latest. Yeah, of course they can go up. I mean, you look at, I've looked at the last 10 years of the 29th pick. That pick has been traded twice during the draft in the last decade. One time they moved up to 22. I forget who did that. And then there was another team that jumped from the second round up to 29. I absolutely think if there is a player that Brad likes, he will not be scared to go up and get him. I mean, we saw him do it with Jamison Williams. He is definitely aggressive when it comes to the players that he likes, knowing the level or having a good feel of the level that he can get them at. He could also move out. I mean, Brad's made a lot of trades in his 3 drafts as GM, and I certainly think that'll be on the table for them.
I would say, because we're talking about quarterbacks.
I was saying quarterback. It's
Yeah, if
what
they
we
would
get
take a quarterback.
But thanks for answering the question.
Okay,
I like it.
so I think that it's basically the same answer that Dave gave. If one of these guys is what Brad Holmes deems to be a franchise quarterback, yeah, I could see them moving up. Look, last year, if a couple things had broken a different way or two, they might have done it last year. They ended up getting Hendon Hooker, so I don't know if that'll factor into it now, but
You think they could move up to draft? The Lions could move up to draft the quarterback?
I don't think they will, but I'm just saying I wouldn't rule anything out with Brad Holmes in any position or any situation because
I
if
would
they-
rule that out.
He's
I would
not
say.
saying, he's just saying.
I'm saying it's possible. I wouldn't call it likely.
Will, he's not ruling it out. Dave is ruling it
Ruling
out.
it out.
Dave's ruling it out.
I'm ruling it out. Yeah, look, they took a swing on a quarterback last year in Hendon Hooker. And I think that's the guy that might be the ultimate successor to Jared Goff. He's a much different quarterback than Goff, but I think they see Hooker in like a parallel universe, maybe as Goff's successor 4 or 5 years down the line when Hendon Hooker is going to be like 47 years old. But I think that was their swing on kind of a draft and stash quarterback, and I don't think as a team that's now poised to win the Super Bowl next season and beyond that they would, I don't want to say waste a pick, but use a pick on a player who won't impact this team right away. They are in position to add draft plug-and-play starters at pretty much every position. I don't think they would do that early on a quarterback who would sit on the bench.
I'll tell you guys this story. Just like Will said that, Brad is very particular when it comes to cornerbacks because he was a cross-checker. He's even more picky when it comes to quarterbacks. You may have seen him give me a little bit of grief at his end-of-season news conference for me wanting a quarterback way back a couple years ago. I did, and I've had long conversations with Brad about this, and him telling me, look, I am very, very picky about the quarterbacks that he likes. And, he's only going to take a quarterback if he thinks that quarterback is going to be a star early on. To your point.
Yeah.
But I don't think that person will be there after those first couple picks. And so, Brad and I had this long talk that I said, well, I'm very much that way too. That's why I wanted you guys to draft a different quarterback, early on in your tenure. And we were coming at it from the same angle, but my job just didn't depend on it. So I know exactly what.
And I think if I remember right, Holmes told us back then he didn't have first-round grades on those guys. He did not have a first-round grade on Fields or Lance. Certainly not up there at that spot. So, I mean, I think that says to Dave's point, he's not going to do it if he doesn't like the guy, for sure. But I also think Jared Goff doesn't stop them from doing anything they want to do, is what I would say.
Stir the pot, Nick. Just stir it,
You
baby.
never know.
Let's talk about the draft prospects that come right from here, because while there is that Honolulu blue influence, a lot of people have their New Jerseys and Campus Martius. We've got people coming in from all over the country and beyond. Michigan sent 18 players, a record, to the NFL Combine for one single school. They may set the record for the most players drafted from one school in one class. Who stands out maybe as a day 2 pick? Nick, I'll go to you. We're looking at A.J. Barner, the tight end, but the list and the videos are long.
Well, he's good too. I like A.J. Barner a lot. But one guy that stands out that scouts have loved way more than I think people think is Mike Sainristil, the captain. And he is arguably the toughest football player, defender anyway, I would say, in this class, pound for pound. Like, he's just, anyone who watched Michigan could see it. He played receiver and defensive back, flipped back and forth during his career. He's much more sticky in coverage than people realize. He's not big, right? He's small. He'll probably be a nickel in the NFL. I don't know if he would fit with a team like Detroit because they already have a Brian Branch, but Sainristil's intelligence in terms of what to do on the field, how to set the table in the back end, but also emotional intelligence, and that's something that people look into a lot more these days than they used to. I think the people at Michigan would point to Mike Sainristil as much as any player there he was responsible for the culture turnaround here. So I think he and Roman Wilson are two guys that we hear a lot about, but Mike is one for sure that I think.
And to your point about Mikey, he did only begin playing cornerback full time a couple years ago,
right.
And he's already a star. And so as you're projecting these players, and that's all this is, you can see so much more room for growth in his game. He has already come so far in 2 short seasons. You think about where he could be 3 or 4 years from now in an NFL system, getting NFL coaching. He really could be a lockdown type guy in the NFL. I think Blake Corum is a really interesting prospect because he had such an amazing career, obviously, at Michigan. He also enters the NFL, and I wrote this down this morning, with 675 college carries to his name. And that's not a good thing in the eyes of NFL evaluators. I mean, that's a lot of tread taken off the tire in their eyes. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs entered the NFL last year with almost half that many carries in college. And so that's one of the reasons that he was viewed, on top of the obvious traits, as a first-round pick. You knew that you were going to get the best out of him. I don't know if scouts look at Blake and wonder if he's already given his best, or at least most of his best at Michigan. But he is a guy that, behind the right blocking scheme, can be a starting level back in the NFL. There's not much receiving ability there, and teams really value that dual threat now. But Blake Corum, also a winner. And if you put him in the right system, he will definitely help you in games.
I'll lead you into it with this. How many GMs and coaches did we hear at the Combine say it's just in the DNA? Guys coming out of Michigan, out of Ann Arbor the last couple of years, that winning culture can help. And it's not just something that's bought. You're not necessarily even born with it, but they've built it there in Ann Arbor. And when you were at the Combine, Dave, what player was standing out to you as far as the buzz?
Yeah, well, beyond that, I just wanted to say on Blake, Jim Harbaugh's taking him in round 3, 4.
That's not. He's not going to not be a Charger.
Yeah.
Chargers need a running back. Like, take that one to the bank. He's going to be the Chargers running back next year. There's no. Nick mentioned Roman Wilson from Michigan. He's going second round too. I mean, this is look. Receivers have become so important in the NFL. The amount of money they get paid. There are a number of really good ones. But I think some of those guys may even get pushed down at the top of the draft just because of the depth of the receiver class in the position. But Roman's a guy that may be flying under the radar a little bit because I don't think anyone really talks about him as a first-round pick. But I would be surprised if he didn't go in the top 64. He's just that, people like what he can do on the field, some of the versatility that he brings. There's also a guy from Western Michigan. You might.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to talk. Marshawn Neal.
Action.
There we go.
Yeah.
Maxon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to be another probable day 2 pick. So, while the top guys from the state, J.J. McCarthy from Michigan, obviously, Darius Robinson, who Will mentioned earlier, local kid from Canton, from Missouri. I think those are probably the next couple guys that have ties to the state.
I also like Nealand a lot for the Lions. I think he is a possibility for Detroit. He's going to be probably, like Dave said, second round. I think I've heard maybe even high second round for him, maybe even in the 30s, because he is super agile, a lot like Aiden, and he's a guy that it came in fits and starts, but I think people think there could be a really bright future for him. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him maybe in there.
And can we expand the local schools to include Toledo? Because we got to talk about Quinyon Mitchell, who is considered the best cornerback in this draft in what looks like a pretty deep cornerback draft. And he was graded the #1 cornerback in the country for the past 2 years by Pro Football Focus. Everyone said, well, he played at Toledo. Then he went to the Senior Bowl this year, and he tore it up. And he said himself, I proved that I can hang with the big dogs. Then he tore up the combine. And there's no reason to think that he won't be a top 20, maybe even a top 15 pick in the draft. And he does not lack self-confidence. He had 4 interceptions and 2 pick sixes in one game 2 years ago against Northern Illinois. And when he was asked recently, who's the best player ever to come out of the MAC? And there have been some good players. Khalil Mack has come out of the MAC, Joe Staley, Ben Roethlisberger. Quinyon Mitchell said, well, probably Quinyon Mitchell. So there's no doubt that he has the ego that I think every great cornerback needs. And I'm fascinated to see not only where he lands, but how quickly he succeeds in the NFL.
I actually spent time with him for a story. He's an outstanding kid,
Yeah.
really, really good kid with a really fun story. And I think that he and Terrion Arnold, the other top corner on the board, if the Lions are going to make a move up, I could see them doing that for either of those guys if they fall, because they're perfect for what they want to do. Both guys are physical. Both guys can run. They're smart and confident. And that's the thing with corners. You don't want a non-confident corner.
Let's bring Terry up. We're going to queue up our next discussion here. So get those phones out. Another poll.
This is so much fun. I wish we could do this all afternoon, but we're going to bring it home here. And great job to the panelists. And you, the audience, have done a tremendous job as well. So now is your chance. You heard Rod say that he thinks the Lions are just getting started. What are your expectations for 2024 for the Detroit Lions?
Why is anyone voting except for that top number right there? Win Super Bowl, right, Will?
It's got to be, right? We'll get the Super Bowl would be,
Honestly, at this point, what this
Some
organization
Packers
has
fans
set
here
up,
saying no playoffs.
Packers fans, they converted some Youpers, though, this past season. That is definitely, that happened. You go to the NFC Championship, you get that close. It's crazy to say, but it is real. It's Super Bowl, and anything else would be not necessarily a disappointment, but pretty darn close to it.
Well,
Fair to
for
say?
them, it would be a disappointment.
Yeah.
They've been clear about that. I remember talking with Alex Anzalone in the locker room after that NFC title game, and there were a lot of broken hearts and teary eyes in that locker room. But Anzalone laid it down, and when I asked him, what are the expectations now entering next season? He said, it's Super Bowl or bust. And he didn't hesitate in saying it, and he wasn't saying it just to say it. They truly believe now that the next step and the only acceptable step is not just to get there, but to win the Super Bowl. And there is a guy named Mahomes who's standing in their way over in the AFC, and they'll have to figure out that. But I don't think there's any reason they can't win the NFC next season. I think in some ways their biggest challenge, and it might seem like a given now, is winning the NFC North. This is not, as we've said, going to be an easy division to navigate. And so they're going to have more internal challenges this season than they faced last year. But if they get there, I do think that when you consider who they'll add in the draft this week, they'll have the horses now to get past a team like San Fran.
Nick, what's the expectation for this team?
Yeah, I agree. I think it has to be. Nobody wants to just get to the Super Bowl, right? No, but that's not really. I feel like that's not. Maybe last year that would have been a goal, but you need to get there and win it. I think but really the goal should be, or the expectation that I have for them is to maintain the situation that you're in right now, so that every single year you wake up in August on the first day of camp and you say, we are trying to win the Super Bowl this year. That's all we're trying to do. There are a handful of teams who every year in the NFL, that's what they do, because they've found a way to get themselves sustained. I think that's what, when Brad Holmes went off on everybody earlier in the year, I think that's what mostly he was talking about. Like, it's not a flash in the pan. We have a recipe to sustain this to where, look, every year we're trying to win a Super Bowl. We're not just trying to hang in and be whatever. I think they've graduated to that, and I think that's a fair expectation.
And the way you do that year in, year out is you establish an identity and then you play to it. Right. And they have done a great job here of establishing the fact that, A, we're going to run the ball down your throat. B, you're not going to run the ball against us. And then C, we're going to gut you with Jared Goff. And they have done things this offseason that allow them to continue following that path. And the best teams, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Chiefs now, they have a blueprint that they can follow every year, and they don't waver from it. And the Lions, it seems like, have theirs now. I mean, they continue to double down on the running game. I think of last year, like, they had a really good running back tandem in DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, and they weren't content with that. They wanted it to be great. So they swap in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and end up with a top 5 rushing attack. And this year, like, they were one of the best teams last season in stopping the run. They wanted to be better there. So they went and added DJ Reader. So they've done a really good job of strengthening their strengths and making that identity even more a part of who they are.
Every year in the NFL, there's the really good teams, the really bad teams, and the mediocre teams. The Lions are in that really good team tier. And when you're in that tier, the goal should be Super Bowl. And for everyone in here thinking about going to that Super Bowl next year in New Orleans, save your money, because at the Super Bowl this year, had a ticket broker tell me, had the Lions made the Super Bowl this year, suites were going for $1 million. $1 million in Las Vegas. So get ready,
Wild.
because that's what it's going to cost next year. And I think anyone who looked into buying ticket prices, Lomas Brown told me a story. He said his wife went to buy a ticket. She works for Delta. Looked at tickets at halftime, bought a ticket at halftime of that San Francisco 49ers game. When she looked before, it was like $600, $700. When she bought it, this is through Delta, her Delta pass, it was like $3,000. So buy your tickets early, buy a refundable ticket to New Orleans if you think they're going. Save your money for a suite, because it's not going to be cheap.
I think the most exciting thing that we all know from covering this team and seeing it up close, and even hearing Rod Wood say, we're just getting started, teams get close. The Bills just stripped down everyone around Josh Allen. The Bengals have gone through injury since getting to the Super Bowl. It is really hard, Nick, to your point, to maintain that. But this team's core is young, it is talented, and as we get ready for the draft, we hope that you feel educated and ready to go, that this team is ready to start swinging at 29. We thank you for having us here today. And Steve, take us home.
Wow, how about a round of applause for these guys here, huh? Guys, this was an absolute blast. What do you think? We should do this every year. What do you think, guys? Out here good? All right. Thank you. And you know we're going to be watching which one of you guys nailed the draft. So
None of us.
None of us.
Terry Radigan, thank you. You did an amazing job. You've got a career in audience participation. So, all right, we're going to have some fun here, all right? We like to make DEC history, and we've got a chance right now to do this, all right? It's been done at Lions games. It's been done at the Super Bowl. It's been done at Red Wings games. It's even been done at U of M hockey games. And in our 90-year history, I can promise you it's never been done. And I'm pretty sure it's never been done at any other economic club around the country. So I want you to get your phones out and make a recording, because I want it to go all over the internet. So I'm going to need a couple of fun volunteers just to stand up. Who's going to start the Jared Goff chant? Come on. It's never been done. Come on. Somebody do it. Come on. There we go, Mario. Jared Goff. Jared Goff. Jared Goff. Jared Goff. Good job. You're not that much fun, but we'll work on you here. All right.